All right, it's me again. I have to debunk this Colon video. He's trying to discredit the graffiti artist Cornbread, and he has done something so ridiculous in this video. I don't know, it's hard to believe.
I told the Philadelphia Tribune, and I'm telling you, my nephew never wrote on Wall, she said. The real Cornbread's not dead. Didn't you hear him on George Wood's radio show? George Wood said the real Cornbread announced his retirement as a spray painter on Tuesday. Cornbread said he had outgrown wall writing, that it was childish, George Wood said. That was good news, but before Cornbread's announced retirement got around, Cornbread's cousin, that's TTP sign, and Cornbread's tutor, one Dr. Cool #1, struck again. I didn't want to write again, Dr. Cool #1 said last night, but when I read Cornbread was dead, I got so mad I went out and I painted. I raised that boy in wall writing.
So if Cornbread is the first graffiti writer, he is the grandfather of the first element of the culture, then why did Dr. Cool #1 just say he raised that boy in wall writing?
So this actually is an interesting article that Colon stumbled across. Unfortunately for him, if he sees it the way he wants to see it, it pushes the date for the beginning of graffiti further back in Philadelphia to prove that it started there first. So I guess he's so adamant against Cornbread that he's willing to, I don't know, make the argument that graffiti really did start in Philadelphia. And that would be before Julio 204. And Julio 204 is supposed to be the Puerto Rican progenitor of graffiti culture. And they're calling him Puerto Rican. He was probably Colombian.
Julio was a little Colombian guy.
But first of all, these journalists and newspapers and this media from outside the culture, and maybe there's even some animosity here. This article itself is a case in point. They falsely reported that Cornbread was killed based on another young man who was killed who was named Cornelius. I don't trust it to be accurate.
I raised that boy in wall writing.
But if Dr. Cool was his mentor, that would mean Dr. Cool was the first graffiti artist in Philadelphia before Julio 204. And Dr. Cool would have to be like a secret graffiti artist before he started bombing, but he was Cornbread's mentor. It doesn't make any kind of sense. Or maybe Dr. Cool was just busting on him for the laughs.
So we wrote our name everywhere. 1970, we met Dr. Cool, Cool Earl, Chewy, Bad News Jimmy, Calypto Kid, Bobby Cool.
So Cornbread says he met Dr. Cool in 1970. Of course, Colon wants him to be lying about that.
I am the world's first modern day graffiti artist.
Right.
And there were graffiti artists before me.
Of course.
You had
Bobby Beck.
Bobby Beck was a flash in the pan. He wrote on the expressway, God is love, Bobby Beck. You had the guy in Vietnam War, which is not the Vietnam War, World War II, Kilroy. Right. But I found that kind of impossible for one person to visit all those islands during the World War II.
He didn't. You know what I'm saying? What he did was, like, he wrote his name on, like, the bombs. So, like, the, because he was in the bombardier factory. So he put Kilroy inside. So every time they was in planes, everybody that would get him would see Kilroy, and a lot of people started writing it for him.
Right.
Yeah, so he didn't do that.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So you're absolutely right. Yeah.
So they were like they were not of the modern day.
Not at all.
I'm the youngest person. I am the first modern day graffiti artist.
Absolutely.
Who gave birth to a global phenomenon.
All right, so now we're going to see Colon do something just ridiculous. It's such a clown move. It actually seems like it's satire of himself.
I thought Cornbread was first. In fact,
anytime you hear this man say, in fact, you know it's about to be some bullshit.
There are guys that never even heard of Cornbread.
Did you even know who Cornbread was at that point? Or did you hear about him?
No, never even heard of him. And then we started hearing about him, and I believe it was Chewy, Louis Colquitt. I don't know if Eddie, Cool Clipper Kid, was hit with him when they finally met each other, and it was like instant friendship.
So you can...
Colon's own clip debunks what he's trying to say. Cool Earl said he never heard of him until he did hear of him. And Colon's trying to say that he never, ever heard of Cornbread. Never, ever. All right, let's take a look at the full clip from this documentary so we can take a look at what Colon was trying to leave out of his video.
We're on the subways. I believe we're coming from downtown, and I'm sitting on one side of the L's in Philadelphia, one's called PTC. Chewy, Louis Colquitt, was sitting on the left side. I'm sitting on the right side. Eddie decided to write Louis, and or Louis could have wrote his own name with a magic marker, black magic marker. And of course, it was permanent type. And Eddie wrote his name. He just wrote Eddie. And Louis wrote Louis. But I asked Eddie to write my name, and Eddie wrote, to my surprise, instead of Earl, he wrote Cool Earl. And that was the beginning of writing Cool Earl everywhere.
I think I was writing Ed at one time, and I changed up to the Kid because back then I had the baby face. And the Kid seemed appropriate, and I was a booster, so I took on the handle of Klepto, and Cool Klepto Kid was perfect. It was ideal.
Did you even know who Cornbread was at that point, or
No.
did you hear about him?
No, never even heard of him. And then we started hearing about him, and I believe it was Chewy, Louis Colquitt. I don't know if Eddie, Cool Klepto Kid, was with him when they finally met each other, and it was like instant friendship. As far as who started first, between Cornbread, Chewy, and Cool Earl, I would say Cornbread because he was 2 years older than myself and Cool Klepto Kid.
Now this was a thing we used to do a lot. We would see Cornbread, Titty, or the North Philly writers, and we would always put our names up to let them know we was there too. You know, and then we would put in magic mark, we would leave messages, meet us, because we were trying to meet each other. remember how we used to always try to meet? I mean, this was going on for years. I know. And we never met each other, and until finally we ended up hooked up. But we would see their names, or vice versa. They would see our names, and they put their names up.
It was more or less a contest. It was pride. It was boasting rights. You know, who's the general, who's the lieutenant, who's the captain, etc. Whose name we can see the most.
Those names were every place. You couldn't help but see them. These kids got around. they were amazing.
All right, back to Colon's version.
And hear Cool Earl saying, "We never even heard of Cornbread." For someone who claimed to have bombed the city, this guy, they never even heard of him. That's interesting.
Those names were every place. You couldn't help but see them.
This is Sandy Podway. He wrote an expose in the Philadelphia Inquirer, May 2nd, 1971. It says, "Cornbread is the legend, the acknowledged king of the walls."
Those names were every place. You couldn't help but see them. These kids got around. they were amazing. Their range, where they were. So it didn't matter if it was, North Philadelphia. It didn't matter if it was out by the airport. You just saw their names.
Those names were every place, he just said. Yet Cool Earl says, we never heard of him.
All right. I'm not even trying to be funny. This dude, he may need psychiatric help. He's looking unhinged. This is ridiculous. Does he think that we've never seen these documentaries? Or that we couldn't look for the documentaries? And he's just gonna clip pieces out? And he's really trying to claim that no one ever heard of Cornbread? He was written about in newspapers, nationally.
I remember reading this article when it first came out in the Inquirer, in the Sunday paper. They used to have this magazine. And when I saw this magazine, today's magazine, with the graffiti writers, Cool Earl, Chewy, and Bobby Cool, it blew me away because I never knew who they were. They were like mystery guys at that time. I would see their names on the wall, never knew who they were. And I remember reading this article over and over and over and over again.
We never heard of him.
Everybody in this city, if you didn't know the name Cornbread, you weren't from this city. you weren't from Philadelphia if you didn't know Cornbread. I mean, the man was everywhere. He was a billboard himself. He was on billboards.
Cars, walls.
He was on schools.
Pavement, the street.
He was on buses.
We never heard of him.
The Miami Herald, 11 June, 1972, Sun, page 225. Names come with numbers in New York. For example, Jose 126. This indicates the graffitist lives on 126th Street in Spanish Harlem. Other artists use code names such as Cornbread, the one-time king of an estimated 10,000 graffitists in Philadelphia, the graffiti capital of the nation. There is stiff competition among the code names. Some of these kids become folk heroes, said Police Sergeant Anthony McGuire, head of Philadelphia's 20-man graffiti squad. A newspaper ran an article on Cornbread about a year ago and it doubled the graffiti in this city. Cool Earl, Kid, Cold Duck, Chewy, and others saw it and stepped up their activity so their names could be seen.
There are guys that never even heard of Cornbread.
1970, we met Dr. Cool, Cool Earl, Chewy, Bad News Jimmy, Calypso Kid, Bobby Cool. And as we came together, we was a band of graffiti vandals. We really just demolished the city of Philadelphia.
It was Lex Street.
Lex Street, okay.
The Lex Street gang.
Okay,
right?
okay,
It was
okay.
Lex Street. It was a whole bunch of them.
So that's the bottom then, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, you down the bottom. Okay.
It was in West Philly.
Yeah, y'all was in the hard time. Yeah.
I walked back and I said, man, it's a whole 10,000 niggas out there, man. You know, so remember. I said, I ain't trying to get killed, just chill out. So I'm walking around thinking what to do next. And I see this guy with a cool cap on and said, Cool Earl. The same Cool Earl right in the walls.
Okay, okay.
I said, well, what's up, man? He don't know who I am.
Yeah,
I said,
yeah.
Ain't nothing, what's up with you? I said, what's going on, man? I'm Cornbread. You ain't Cornbread. I put my mark on right to the wall. I go, Cornbread, king of the walls. He said, yo, Louis, Earl, Chewy, Bad News, everybody, Cornbread over here. They came running. That's what's up. We all these same niggas outside with the kick out.
Yeah.
And my boss at the front of what we were gonna do. I hooked up with June Street.
Yeah.
June Street is. I told him we gotta pop the niggas outside. He goes outside. Look, these is our people. We don't want no shit. So if it's gonna be any shit, gonna deal with us.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Don't walk with us.
Yeah.
We walk with them to the projects. And that was cool.
That's what's up, yeah. See, that's all at the beginning, you know.
Yeah, so we got together, we turned the city of Philadelphia inside out.
He's now going to go on to tell us that it's not New York.
All right, before we get into that, I think it is interesting that Cool Earl is saying that he started independently from Cornbread. His crew started in West Philadelphia, while Cornbread started in North Philadelphia. You have various people in the same environment, access to the same equipment. We're talking about paint cans and markers with similar experiences, similar outlooks, similar goals. You're going to have more than one instance of creation pushing the culture forward. So we have two inceptions here. And this is what Colon actually wants to discredit Cornbread for, because Cornbread's story shows that there is a culture, not an individual person, a culture, a cultural movement from the black communities in North Philly and West Philly.
He put the name of his club on the wall, Delta Phi Soul, which was a dancing and a dressing club.
Ever since I've known about graffiti, there always was a club attached to it. Exactly. And I guess that's like part of the lineage, you know, that was passed down from Cornbread and in their era all the way down to the era that I came in the 70s and stuff. It was like, you know, it was always crews. Right. And, you know, and guys were notorious, and they also had a lot of other attributes that, you know, we don't care to go into right now. But you know, you kind of cling to it. You wanted to belong. You know, it was like being a part of it. You know, it was a community.
Cornbread, you guys, you know, Delta Phi Soul, they did stepping. You know, they did all of that. And now you have the breakdancing era now. But it still is the same thing. They were basically teenagers, man, going out and becoming a part of some type of a group, or what you would call a subculture. They were about clothing. It was important. I mean, it's not just something where they just threw on some clothes. These guys were obsessive to the point where if a guy went and bought a $300 pair of ostrich shoes, and they were the same color as yours, he would take them back because he wanted to make sure his were different.
Cornbread he wouldn't come out the house unless he had starch khaki pants on. He had to have starch khaki pants and high top comforts on. Or if he didn't have on high top comforts, he had on some Stacey Adams.
Yeah, but we wore goody two shoes, F-me pumps, truckers, and we were the fashion. We were
We were the fashion queens of the city.
We would go to Zachariah. We would change twice a day. That's how many coats of clothes we had.
Sometimes you would change 3 times a day.
Oh, we had so many clothes.
You never wore the same thing twice. Never. Never. Summertime, we changed clothes 2 and 3 times a day, from head to toe. Everything. Whatever we wore, it was new. It was one time only.
Now he's gonna tell us the famous story about the Michael Jackson or the Jackson 5 plane where he writes his name on the plane. But the question that really needs to be asked, did that even really happen?
So, George Woods, a Philadelphia DJ, announced on the radio that the Jackson 5 was coming to Philly to do a show at the Uptown Theater.
Right.
And, Jackson 5 was one of the hottest groups in America, and you can do that, right? Since 9/11, everything has changed. Yeah. But back then, you could come out to the tour man and anybody, there's like a publicity stunt, the Jackson 5. So I goes in the day that the plane arrived, and about maybe 70 people down there, man. And it comes in, it idles about 10 minutes. The middle door lets down, step well. Michael comes to the top of the stairwell. They were kids. Everybody went ballistic, screaming and hollering, whooping and screaming.
Wow.
Well, Michael, Tito, Jackie, Marlo, Jermaine came down the steps. It was total chaos. I didn't come in to see the Michael Jackson 5. I didn't come to see none of them. When they walked through the crowd, everybody hooped and hollered trying to get to him. I said, up the steps, write my name on the jet.
You didn't.
Did I? They talked about me like they talked about Jesus. I'm trying to tell you something. That would make me, I knew that. I remember when that jet and the elephant, that would make me the elite graffiti artist of the world.
And then it started rumors where we rode on the Jackson 5's airplane. Yeah. And we would agree, yes, we did that. And we didn't. It was just little stories that would spring up from small things like that, the I-beam, to writing on the airplanes and all this other stuff. We didn't get that far.
So when Cool Klepto Kid said we, was he talking about his crew, or was he talking about all graffiti writers, or was he talking about Cornbread specifically?
That our rivals was Odigma Experience. Odigma Experience was Cool Earl, Collector Kid, Badness, Jimmy, Cold Duck, Bobby Cool, and we didn't know each other. We only knew each other by reputation.
It is possible to graffiti an airplane, and something like this is probably what most people think about when they hear about graffiti in the airplane. But this is not what Cornbread said he did.
I knew that if I wrote my name on this plane, it would make me the elite graffiti artist of the world. No other graffiti artist has ever written his name on an elephant, much less a jet. Absolutely. When the plane came in, it idled about 10, 15 minutes. Finally, the door let down, and Michael Jackson came to the stop and he threw a kiss to everybody. Because it was total troop of hollering, just crazy screaming, and everybody was like in disarray. They wanted to touch me. The Jackson 5 was the hottest thing in America. Right. Michael, Tito, Jackie, Jermaine, and Marlo came down the steps. Everybody just went blizz. Everybody just went crazy. And in the midst of this chaos, I said up the steps. Cornbread on the jet. So I didn't come down to see Jackson 5. I came down them steps and went back into the side of the terminal.
Now, it's a good story, and I don't see enough reason for it to be discredited. It was something unique and wild to do, but compared to the crazy things that graffiti artists have done since then, it's not unbelievable.
So here's Cornbread in a juvenile detention center. He's writing his name on the walls because he sees the gang names on the walls. So he's influenced by gang graffiti.
Yes, hip-hop culture has always been adjacent to, affiliated with the evolution of, the transformation of gang culture. I don't know why Colon thinks this is a criticism. I mean, he looks disgusted. Why? if anything, this shows a parallel or a connection between Philadelphia and New York culture.
The already existing gang graffiti that littered the Philadelphia landscape prior to Cornbread writing on walls. Gang graffiti then, as it is now, are individuals marking territory for an entity, the gang, with a personal roll call of its membership.
So he's influenced by gang graffiti.
In Philadelphia, gang graffiti had its own style, and some was written very flamboyantly, sometimes referred to as Broad Street style. This is the style that a writer named Top Cat, 29D, for 29th and Diamond, took with him when he moved to New York. He began to write Top Cat 126, and the style was called Broadway Elegant. It was an influential style that was traced to create some of the early artworks on the subway trains.
So he's influenced by gang graffiti.
Philadelphia was like Vietnam. The gangs were so bad. It's a wonder I'm still alive. A lot of guys that I grew up with are dead or in jail. It was terrible.
A lot of gang activity was going on at that time around the neighborhood, and you know, it was almost at that time you had a choice of what you wanted to do as far as activity in the neighborhood. You was either in the gang or you wasn't. Our outlet to choose to not to be from a gang was partially right on the wall.
This was illegal. However, right, we didn't see it that way. We saw it as something that was necessary, you know, to fulfill, you know, our sense of belonging, you know, in pretty much in neighborhoods that you know, that didn't offer a whole lot. You know, society didn't offer us a whole lot, but so we had to pretty much, you know, make up lives for ourselves.
This was a cry out, you know, to kind of like be heard. You know, we were throwing our names out here. Hey, I'm here. This is the kid. Cool Kid, this is Chewy, this is Cool Earl, you know. I mean, and I remember being into poetry real strong, and just, you know, looking back at, you know, trying to analyze myself. You know, I would say, what was I doing? You know, I really got carried away with it. I mean, I know a lot of it was fame, but you know, I also look at it as a cry for help. I actually believe it was a cry out for help.
When I was a kid, there was a bunch of gangs when I was growing up. It seemed like each gang had their little social club, you know, tied in with it. And around my way, there was a gang, and their social club was called Imperial Black Masters, IBM. And I thought that was the coolest name in the world. I was a pretty good pickpocket, you know, so I consider myself sly or slick. The artistic part came from the fact that my crew, I wanted to be the best writers in the world. That was my mandate. You know, I had to have the best writers in the city. I didn't care about their rep on the wall. You know, I didn't care how many hits they had or anything like that. I just had to have the best writers.
Around Wissahickon Park, I met a couple guys up there, and they created a club called HCS, which was the Hip City Swingers. At that time, there was a group out called Kool and the Gang that had a song called Hollywood Swingers, so we came out with a club which is similar to the name.
Cornbread and them did their thing. Then you had in the early 70s to like almost the late 70s, you know, ACS, Sam One, and other clubs, they took it to a different level. I never knew some 30, 35 years later that graffiti would be like the topic of movies, books, documentaries.
When we started out, our original name was Imperial Casanova Persuaders. It was like being in Hollywood, you know, in Philadelphia. It was like, you know, being like, you know, like my smile. It was real bright, you know. It was like, you know, we could do no wrong.
I'm coming in from writing my name one night, and I seen all these guys sitting on the corner of my block bustling on each other. I walked over to them, I got my mask, I listened to them talk about each other. After about 5-10 minutes of that, I walked across the street, put my spray paint, I put Cornbread, a big wall. He came on and said, "Damn, that's you?" I said, "Yeah, you from around here?" I said, "This is my neighborhood. You and y'all in my neighborhood. Your neighborhood, where you been?" I said, I just came home. And y'all must have moved in the neighborhood. I was gone. I've been gone over 2 years. Wow. So Titty says to me, can I write my name? I give him spray paint. He wrote Titty with the emblems of Delta, Phi, Soul. I didn't know what that meant. I said, what does that mean? He said, that's not crew. That's Delta, Phi, Soul. That's our club we belong to. I said, what do y'all do? I said, we have socials, we have parties, we go on excursions, we go to different people's houses, we party, we eat, we dance, we get dressed, and we have a good time. That's all about having a good time and join us. Come on, join us. I said, I'll join you. I joined Delta Phi Soul. I joined Delta Phi Soul, all of them, until all my niggas.
The first graffiti crews in the world also sprang up in this era, most notably Cornbread's crew, Delta Phi Soul, Club, Odigma Experience, and ICP, the Imperial Casanova Persuaders, founded in 1969 and still continue strong to this very day. ICP is without a doubt the oldest, longest active graffiti crew in the world. Citywide meetings would be held in various locations throughout the city. The first of these such meetings occurred in what's called socials, or dance parties that were held in different neighborhoods in the late 1960s, such as the ones held by Delta Phi Soul and Club Odigma Experience in 1969. Early all graffiti writer meetings were held at Broad and Erie, first called in 1973 by the prestigious Hip City Swingers, the club responsible for many of the early developments of graffiti writing. It was eventually moved to 11th and Market Street, where clubs from all over the city could come without the prevailing threat of coming to one club's turf.
So he's influenced by gang graffiti.
New York is rapidly becoming known as the graffiti capital of the country, a title Philadelphia has held for years. The numbers you see after the names refer to the youngster's street or building or school in an otherwise huge and anonymous city.
One of the things that really set it off was an article that appeared in the New York Times in July 1971 that was about Taki 183. And he's seen as the Africa Bambaataa of graffiti.
You want protection, you want nothing to happen to you, you gotta join with us.
The older guys that were like 15, 16, 17 years old, they were starting to wear their gang jackets. And that caught my attention because it was more violent. And I liked it, the violence, more than I did the graffiti. So I started being a gangster, but a graffiti gangster with my jacket.
The new gangs were more vicious than ever and heavily armed. Most writers wanted to avoid them, but others were ready to join.
They tried to take over one of my division, but they didn't quite make it, and we killed 2 of their guys. They tried to burn down my clubhouse. We killed 2 of their guys. And 5 of their guys rolled up on one of the Savage Nomads. You know what they told them? Oh, we're going to give you hell, baby. We're going to give you hell. And they didn't even kill him.
That time, we had this little group called the Latin Lords. It was me, Babyface, a cousin of mine from the Bronx, a couple other brothers, though, you know. He told me, once you guys become Savage Nomad, I said, bet. So I see your Babyface, let's become Savage Nomads, and we became Savage Nomads. This was the beginning, you see? We did a new club. Then after we got established, for you to join the club, you gotta go through different shit, though. Get initiated, get your ass kicked, and whatever, though.
I was affiliated with the Halifax Sisters. It was a group of girls, and we would hang out, and a lot of times we go to 104th Street, and we get together with the Savage Nomads.
It was a good time back then with the gangs. Back then, you'd get into your fights, you'd have your stabbings, fighting with the chains, fighting with bottles.
Gang graffiti. He's now going to go on to tell us that it's not New York that creates hip-hop. It's actually Philadelphia. Check this out.
There's something, we had a movement of 150,000 teenagers who involved themselves in the social uprise, you know? And our convention day annually was in Atlantic City before the casinos was built. You can imagine 150,000 teenagers occupying all the hotels in Atlantic City. That's what we did. We took over. Wow. That was the first wave of the hip-hop revolution. 150,000 teenagers involved themselves in the social uprise. We adopted college fraternity name to identify ourselves. Our annual convention was in Atlantic City before the casinos was built. Mm-hmm. When we came to Atlantic City during an event called Omega by the Sea, this event was given by real straight up college fraternity students who went to college, who wanted to be judges, lawyers, presidents, and congressmen. They were the real fraternity. We were the street fraternity, Philadelphia street fraternity, 150,000 strong. When we capped Atlantic City, we took Atlantic City over. There was no casinos. We consumed all the hotels, and every hotel had a ballroom. In every ballroom, there was a battle. We prepared dance steps weeks, months at a time, and we went to battle. That was the first wave of the hip-hop revolution.
So Colon doesn't bother giving an answer to the possible influence from Philadelphia, the movement of black teenage social clubs, the black fraternities, and these large events, parties, and functions they were having in Atlantic City. He thinks just painting Cornbread as a liar is good enough.
And Julio 204 is already an established writer in 1967. So
now, I wouldn't really classify Julio 204 as an established writer. Established in what? It is notable that youth at the time in Manhattan were writing their names on the walls. The format they were using would, if it was Julio, would have been Julio 204 of 204th Street. And it seems that he changed his format to just Julio 204, maybe to shorten it and be able to get up. That's true. And this is documented. It would be interesting if we could find him to ask, what made him change his format to Julio 204 and start writing in his neighborhood a little bit more prominently. And if it had anything to do with him belonging to the Savage Nomads, it's reported. All right, a side note real quick here. These images of Julio 204's tag from the documentary Wall Writers 2016, I'm just going to go ahead and say that they're probably fraudulent. I don't know what else to call it. This image here is from a book published in 1972. It's considered to be the first documentation of graffiti in New York. It's called Golden Boy as Anthony Cool by Herbert Cole. And you can see that this image originally doesn't have a Julio 204 tag in it, and it's been doctored. And I'm looking at the Julio 204 tags. I think they're all from the same image, superimposed to look like they're different places and different images. So, I don't know. It's a documentary. Is it fraudulent? Yeah, I think so.
Incorrigible, to say the least.
All right. Philadelphia versus New York. Cornbread versus Julio 204. I guarantee you that if it wasn't Cornbread and it was Pan de Maíz versus Jamal 204, that Colon's story would be 180 degrees the reverse. He would be championing Philadelphia as the birthplace of graffiti, as the birthplace of hip-hop. If it was a story of a Puerto Rican progenitor of tagging and bombing from a Puerto Rican community, I guarantee you Colon would be telling that story. That it was the Puerto Ricans in Philadelphia who started everything. The same as he's tried to claim that hip-hop music is rooted in bomba from Puerto Rico. 100% guaranteed his whole shit would be flipped. Incorrigible, to say the least.
The first graffiti names, Tacky 183, Filthy Greek, Joe 182nd, Babyface 86, Stitch 1. But Julio 204...
Colon be doing shit like...
This guy, they never even heard of him. That's interesting.
All right, so let's look at a timeline between Philadelphia and New York. All right, 1960-something, Colon is open to the idea that Dr. Cool #1 started and somehow became the mentor to Cornbread and, raised him in graffiti writing. So I think we can actually take that off the timeline. Probably didn't happen, okay? 1965, Cornbread, his origin story. He originates his name in a juvenile detention center. He starts writing his name all over the center, all over the walls, and he gets the idea from the gang members who were doing the same thing. In 1967, in September, Cornbread is released from the juvenile detention center and starts tagging in North Philadelphia. The same year, Cool Klepto Kid, Cool Earl, and Chewy, they start tagging on the inside of a train. In the same year, Julio 204 starts tagging in Inwood. There's quite a bit of documentation that says Julio actually started in 1968, but I think it's okay to say he started in 67, a couple months before Cornbread. But I think what's most important to understand is that Julio 204 did not influence Cornbread to start writing and did not influence Cool Klepto Kid, Cool Earl, and Chewy to start writing. These are three separate inceptions, and I think probably more we don't know about. In 1968 or earlier, we have these social clubs, Delta Phi Soul, which Cornbread joins, and Club Odigma Experience. In 1969, these clubs began operating as graffiti clubs, in particular the Hip City Swingers, which is formulated as a graffiti club. 1969 is also the year that Taki 183 starts tagging, along with Philty Greek and Greg. In 1970, Top Cat 126 either moves from Philadelphia to New York or visits Philadelphia and brings back the gangster hand style, which becomes the Broadway elegant style in New York. 1970, the year that Taki 183 leaves his neighborhood and begins bombing around the city. 1970 was also the year Pennsylvania State proposed a law banning spray paint because the graffiti was so good in Philadelphia. In 1971, the Acquirer magazine article, Why They Do It, is published in May, and a couple months later, the Taki 183 Spawns Pen Pals is published in July. At this point, for several years, there had already been newspaper coverage in Philadelphia. Also in 1971, we get the first graffiti crew formed in New York, in Brooklyn, the Ex-Vandals. By 1972, the press considers Philadelphia the graffiti capital of the world. So I think what this timeline clearly shows that there was a graffiti culture establishing itself in Philadelphia earlier than New York. And so Colon and his crew would want to say, that it doesn't count if it's outside the Bronx, or it doesn't count if it's outside New York City. And then that begs the question, okay, so when does Philadelphia graffiti become part of hip hop? Is it, a proclamation from Bambaataa? Is it because Kool Herc said so? I think the real answer to that question, the only answer it could be, is that graffiti had always been a part of hip hop or a precursor to hip hop culture. And maybe not the progenitor of the entire culture, but at least a close parallel and an exchange of culture between Philadelphia and New York. Now, unlike Colon would do, I'm not going to say that Cornbread is the absolute godfather of all of hip-hop culture. All right? However, I do think there is an important line of investigation that can be done further, and that is the possible cultural connections between Philadelphia in terms of these social clubs, the parties they were throwing in Atlantic City, the dances, the step shows, and what effect that may have had on early hip-hop in New York. Early hip-hop specifically in Brooklyn.
The tales that are coming from Cornbread's mouth are encourageable, to say the least. So when it comes to this story of writing and graffiti, Cornbread is definitely not the godfather, the grandfather, the initiator, the creator of graffiti. Not by a long shot.
Graffiti was a major problem facing this city. In fact, it was, I would say, the #1 urban issue facing this city at that time. I received more questions on graffiti than I did on crime, than I did on housing, than I did on education. As I went around the city, there was, in fact, just graffiti everywhere. Yeah, I'm not sure I ever said to you how much I appreciated meeting you, getting to know you, and really learning that you were not the monster that I thought that you were. That you really was a decent guy, that you had expressed yourself, but there was a point in life where you saw what you were doing as not being of a positive nature, what you thought it might have been, and then you did something about it, that you basically were able to take all of your experience and help the city, I think, become almost a graffiti-free city. And I really appreciate and respect you a great deal for that.
Philadelphia is now known as the Mural capital of the world. Hold up, one more thing. I raised that boy in wall writing. I guarantee you, Colon didn't think I was going to see this. One man from Fremont wrote that Cornbread was not black, but Puerto Rican. He has an afro hairdo, but he is blue-eyed, the man wrote. These motherfuckers was doing that back then.